Well, welcome to Three Rural Writers in Conversation. We're going to talk about our debut collections to writing in wide open spaces and places in our hometowns. So we have Linda Niehoff and Jolene McIlwain and me, Audra Kerr Brown. So what we're going to do tonight, thank you, is we have some questions that we want to ask each other. We're going to go through those. But Jolene is manning the chat. So if anyone else has any questions, we'll get to those probably toward the end, I imagine. We'll see how this flows. We all know each other, so it'll be fun. It'll be fun. Well, I'll go ahead and read the official bios. Okay, is that all right? All right. I'll start with Linda. Linda Niehoff is a writer and photographer living in the same small Kansas town where she grew up. Her short fiction has appeared in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, Daily Science Fiction, Weird Horror, Escape Pod, Apex Magazine, and elsewhere, both online and in print. She's been nominated for the Best Small Fictions Anthology, Best Microfiction, the Shirley Jackson Award, and the Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy Series. Her short story collection, The Ghost You Know, is her first book. I was going to hold that up. And it's awesome. Jolene McIlwain's writing appears widely in literary journals and the Best Small Fictions Anthology. It has been nominated for several pushcarts and named finalist for Best of the Net, Glimmer Train's New Writers Award, and Arts and Letters Unclassifiables Contest, as well as semi-finalist in Nimrod's Catherine Ann Porter Prize and both American Short Fiction's Short and Shorter Fiction Contest. Her debut short story collection, Sidle Creek, is just out with Melville House and received a starred review from Publishers Weekly. She was born, raised, and currently lives in Western Pennsylvania. Wow. And I live with my husband and two children at the end of a dirt road in southeast Iowa. My work has appeared in the Best Small Fictions 2018 and 2021 editions and Wigleaf's Top 50 Very Short Fiction list. I've been nominated for a Vera Award, Best Microfictions, and Best of the Net. I'm the former managing editor of New Flash Fiction Review. I am now the founding creator and archivist of the sometimes YouTube channel, The Flastronauts, which explores the ever-expanding universe of flash fiction. All right. So I'll make sure I covered everything I was going to cover there. All right, well, let's get started. Someone's wanting back in. Okay, I think it was your mom. Oh. Linda, tell us a little bit about your book.
Okay. The Ghost You Know is my first book. It is 5 original short stories, as you can imagine, ghost stories. It deals with everything from first love, first loss, to ghosts becoming endangered species and being collected in a natural history museum, as well as a Victorian romance, fairly light considering the rest of it. They're not exactly scary. I like to think of them as creepy nostalgia. I'm interested in the things that haunt people. I'm interested in not necessarily whether or not ghosts are real, but if people think they're being haunted. I'm also interested in the idea that often we are haunting ourselves and that you are the ghost that you know. So Jolene, your turn. Tell us about Sidle Creek.
Okay, so Sidle Creek, out with Melville House last month, is a short story collection of 22 stories ranging from flash fiction of just a few pages long. And my longest story is 11,000 words. It's a crime story. And then I have all the range in between. And these stories are loosely inspired based on the small town where I grew up, which is Katanning, PA, in the Appalachian Hills, or Appalachian. We have had this discussion on which word we use. I personally use Appalachian. But anyway, I was working on these stories for about a decade while I was helping to take care of my dad, who was bedbound. He had suffered a hemorrhagic stroke. And at the same time, I was raising my son. So I was in that sandwich generation. And I was really thinking a lot about, while I was writing these stories, how men travel through the world, especially in rural places. And I wrote a lot about men initially, and then I started writing about women in rural spaces. And I was trying to sort of interrogate some of the stereotypes and myths and caricatures of people in rural America, especially in my area. But I found that then I got into, universal themes of grief, loss, love, resilience throughout. So I'm hoping it's a balanced collection, but it is kind of heavy. So hopefully, going into it that there are some tough ideas and tough themes. But anyway, it's out there and I'm really excited about it. So how about you, Audra?
I think we all write about tough things. I don't even know where I put my book. Oh, there it is. So, well, thank you. Unlike you two, I feel like I didn't know what I was doing. I was just scooping up all things I wrote and scooping them to put them together in collection. I didn't really think they were connected. I didn't really think I had anything that I was saying. I didn't feel like, oh, I didn't know what I was trying to do. But as I was putting it together, I kind of could see a little bit of connections here and there. And Linda once described my work as being gothic. And I was like, first I was like, oh no, I'm not gothic. But the more I thought about that, the more I could see, yeah. So I call it Midwestern Gothic. We all know that literary magazine that no longer with us, but Midwestern Gothic. So I took that term, but I also call it emotional horror because it has a lot to do with family relationships. And I tend to write, which I didn't realize until I was putting it together, from a child's point of view or for a young adult. I have very few that I don't know if I have any with adults in it from the adult point of view. So I tend to stay in the child point of view. So with family relationships going wrong, 12 little short flashes. All right.
Audra, you write that one lovely woman. I love that story, Illumination, about a
Yes.
woman who miscarried.
Beautiful.
That's your one adult that I can think of. I had to throw that in there because I'm such a fan of that beautiful little story.
That's my favorite.
I love that one.
That one I wrote in one of Meg's classes, Meg Polkris. And I just had to I feel like I tacked on the ending because I just had to turn something in. But then I was going to add something later, like I'll work on it later. But I liked it after setting it aside for a while. But Linda, I want to ask you a question about yours. And my question, well, I'm going to read a little bit from The Problem with Bones, which I don't know, I might say is probably my favorite. I don't know. I like the first one too about all the girls. There's just so much I love about all of it, but I really like museums. So I think this one spoke to me because it was in museums. But you wrote that sometimes the whole world looked like a display at the museum. The market, the bin of white shrimp, sea scallops, and Kumamoto oysters with their labels sticking up on toothpicks looked like one of the museum shelves. Sometimes standing outside her apartment looking up to the windows, she imagined she was walking along one of the shadowy hallways, looking into the small square displays that lined the walls. Each window a moment contained, a moment trapped. Her radiator that hissed heat was a long ago silver rib cage. Everything an artifact, everything old and worn. And I love the details in all your writing, but in that paragraph, I could really see her walking. But then I thought about that most of your stories, I think all of your stories mention windows at one point or another. And some are more prominently, like I know that you're talking about windows, but some others, I wonder if it was a subconscious image that comes up. And sometimes they're literal windows, but sometimes they're like half open doors, like a window to another world. Jars are like little windows, like she said, you know,
I
like
thought that. Yeah. The creepy
there's
thing.
just a lot of things to look through and look in, and also to have like a interaction between an exchange between the protagonist and what lurks beyond. And so I love these wonderful window moments, and I could see them as metaphors for like alienation and longing, mystery, regret, and sometimes hope. But are these windows, are they, have you thought about these? Are they a conscious thing of yours, or just something delicious your subconscious has whipped up? And I just love your windows.
Thank you. Well, in all honesty, Audra did talk to me about Windows a couple weeks ago, and my first thought, which I didn't tell her, was, "Oh no, she's on to me." My little trick of Windows. Some of it is, I would say probably all of it is subconscious. I very much believe in the subconscious. I try really hard not to control where a story is going. I think of it like when you dream at night. Robert Olin Butler talks about, from where you dream, I think is the name of his book. And I love that because we don't normally control our dreams. They just take us where they will. And oftentimes, sometimes you'll wake up and think, I just dreamt a book or I just dreamt a story, and they can surprise you. And that fascinates me. So I'm very much an idea of, or I very much write from the idea of, well, if this is coming up, it's coming up for a reason. And I'm thankful for words. So sometimes I'll talk to myself and say, if I say, oh, there's windows again, I'll say, do not quench that. Don't ever quench it when the words are coming. But at the same time, I am very conscious that I do love windows. I walk a lot, and this is going to sound creepy, so be it. I love looking, especially in the gloaming, at that lit window and the person inside and that little bit of their life that you see. And I'm as equally interested by what you don't see, the dark house, that you don't see that little tableau and what is happening behind those walls, through that crack, in that little sliver of beautiful gold light, because somebody out there is doing the murdering and the killing, the raping, the whatever, the abuse. And so there's a lot of darkness underneath. But another thing about windows also will tie into, because I want to ask you guys about writing in your same small town. And so I'll ask that question and answer that question while I'm also answering the windows question. I was born in this tiny small town. It was 2,000 people when I was growing up. It's 4,000 now. We had a big boom. But my parents, one is from Chicago and one is from Fresno, California, and they settled here in Kansas. And the funny thing about that is I'm surrounded by people who, even in high school, were understanding new relationships and cousins, and even now I'll hear of new, oh, that person's related to that person. And so I feel like in many ways I belong here, but at the same time, I've always been sort of looking in that window. I had parents that were from huge cities talking about this small town and what was different about this small town. So in some ways I was raised like a tourist, and I was raised in a way of not putting it down, but seeing it different, seeing it through sort of a tourist's eyes maybe. And so I think if I were to psychoanalyze myself, that's where the windows come in, that I'm looking at something through a frame. And yes, of course, sometimes looking in at the glass at what everyone has with these huge families all nearby, these huge picnics, these gatherings, and I don't have that. We're spread out. So in some ways, I do think it's very conscious. I'm very interested in these little slivers of people's lives that we see. I'm also very aware of that feeling of being other a little bit, of being on
I
the
catch that.
outside
Yeah,
and
reading you,
looking
because
in.
the
Yeah,
walking, sorry to interrupt you, the walking and looking out, that was in a
yeah.
couple stories, walking through an isolated town at night. And
Yes.
I felt that. I
Mhm.
just want to say, yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes, again, I'm repeating myself over and over, but my favorite writers, I love it. I love when I
Yeah,
read the
when you
things
find those
that,
little connections and threads.
exactly. And when I'm reading someone, I go, well, I'm reading them because I want to read that. I want to have a similar experience that maybe I had before. I mean, yes, I want a new story, but I want that feeling that it's that person. And so again, I try to not stifle the thing that wants to come. And I have searched for years for this quote, but I swear there was a time in my life when I read that Tim Burton, when asked, why are you always writing about skeletons, said, I will always write about skeletons until I'm tired of them. And so I think, yeah, there is this idea of looking through into the private life of something, of seeing something that the other person is not necessarily aware that you're seeing, but also being that other and that outsider. And so, yeah, I guess to answer shortly would be, a lot of it's subconscious, probably more than I realize, but I'm aware when it comes up. I don't plan it, but I'm aware of some of it probably. Yeah. And I thought, oh no, she's on to me. That's my trick. It's my trope. So, okay, talking about small towns, that I don't know that I fully realized until recently that all three of us actually live where we were born. I've always lived in the same county. The farthest away that I've lived is half an hour away. I went to college half an hour away from where I live. I now live in the same town across town from my parents. And I didn't realize that you guys also, Audra, you went away for a while, correct?
I did for 20 years, probably.
Okay, so I'm really curious to hear. I don't know a lot of people who write in my real life. Most of the people I know are online that write. I know some. But I'm curious, what do you think living in the same place for 40 or 50 years does for your writing first? And I'm also interested in, are there things you can't write about? Are there things that you say, that is not, it is my story, but I better not tell it? Are there, and I'm interested in that from both of you.
Yeah, there's things I'm saving until some people are gone because I want to write about them, but I can't. I just can't right now. Even if I change a lot of this, people know, But on the flip side, I also don't like it because I'm also thinking people thinking everything I write is autobiographical, But I don't think anyone local really reads my stuff. So I don't know if I really should worry about any of it because I don't think they do read. I don't think they know. So
we have this lake and everybody calls it the backside of the lake. To me, it's just the backside of the lake. And it's creeping into my stories more and more because, the things that happen on the backside of the lake, parents don't know, even though they were also on the backside of the lake. So more and more I'm finding this creeping into my stories. And I'm like, again, do you quench the words? No. So I just let it happen. Jolene, what about you?
Okay, so yeah, so I started out not wanting to really write about anything bad that happened in the town for fear that I'd get myself into trouble or whatever. But I took a couple classes and one in particular I took with Lee Martin, and he talked about writing about these radical moments that change us in our life. And we have a before and after we did something or something happened to us. And it really hit me deeply. I thought, yeah, a lot of stories that I love are these stories where a character has had a moment in time that had this radical change in how they saw the world. Their worldview just changed, or something about them changed inside. So while I have a couple stories that they're fictionalized, highly fictionalized, there's one that is about when I thought I would never, ever, ever tell this story. And you're going to laugh so hard probably when you hear what I was worried about revealing, but I'm revealing it. It's out there now. Everybody will know I had stolen a Reese's peanut butter cup.
That was you?
From a gas station.
That's about you?
I know that sounds so silly right now, but I have to tell you, I held it so deeply. And I found out in the writing of the story that what bothered me so much about stealing that Reese's peanut butter cup is that the person who was in real life, the person that owned the gas station, I felt like I'd betrayed him because he believed in us kids and thought we wouldn't steal anything from him. And so the story is highly fictionalized the way I've written it, but in the writing of it, I learned so much more about myself. So I think that for me, I have pushed myself to write about the things, and that's a little tiny one, but there are some
Beautiful
other things
story,
that I've written
though.
about that happened in my town, and or something happened in my town that inspired me to write about something that was happening inside me. So I think for me, I actually pushed myself into writing things about my town that were problematic, that I wondered about. And one of those was, how do we betray each other in a small town? Another one was, how do we harm each other without realizing it? How are we complicit as a group in harming another group? So yeah, I push myself toward it, but I'm really happy with the veil of fiction, because I can really go in deeply to the emotional truth of the stories, but I can change all of the details, so it doesn't have to be autobiographical. So I really like enjoyed that part of it.
And I love that. That's good. I'm gonna steal that. I'm gonna do a writing prompt about things we've stolen. That'd be a great
Oh, I better write that down.
thing. I stole the only thing I stole two things I think in my life. One was a copy of Gone with the Wind from the school library,
Oh,
and I read it. I was in 8th grade and I wanted it and I read it. And then I stole an ashtray once.
Audra. Okay,
I
you
didn't
should
even
check out.
smoke. I wasn't even a smoker.
Kathy Fish left a comment, and I think it's aimed at both of you.
oh, sorry. I can't hang around with criminals, Jolene. Yeah, I know. It's really rough that I did that. I'm so sorry. I think the other thing, though, that is really fascinating is that sometimes the things you think you will never write about keep popping up. And so, just like you said with the Windows thing, Linda, I think that's true of me. I kept finding that I was writing about, infertility, issues with women's health. Something that really bothered me for years and years was how women were kind of denied proper health and not believed. And for a long time, I was afraid if I wrote about it, I would sound like I was whining somehow. And then I realized, oh, I'm playing into this myth. I'm actually, by not writing about it, I'm actually perpetuating the stereotype. So I pushed myself again to write about women's issues, especially women's medical issues and mental health issues, because I thought I can't step away from this. So I think it's important to look at what you are afraid to write. And sometimes you're not ready. Like Audra said, there are certain stories. Yeah, me too. I'm not going to write them until, all of my family members are gone or whatever, something happens maybe. But I think that it's important to look at why you're not writing them. And fiction does help us get to more of an emotional truth, because you can change every detail if you need to. But you still stay with that same core story. So.
And don't you find that you do that sometimes, where you'll write something? I have a story in my collection called Stay Out the Woods. And I didn't know, it's based on a story that my son, who was dog sitting, told me. And we have friends that have just this beautiful wooded area, like their own little personal woods behind their house. And he took them out at night, and the dogs, and off leash. And it started to snow, and he had his headlamp on. He's an Eagle Scout. He knows how to orienteer. And he's out there in the woods, and all of a sudden he realizes he doesn't know exactly where he is. And he switches on his headlamp, and all he sees is the snow. It's reflected back. And so he switches it off, and he can hear his breath, the dog's breath, and nothing else. Okay, so he got back to the house, everything was fine. But I heard him tell that story, and I thought, I have to write that. I had no idea where it was going. And I sat down and just stick with the detail, all 5 senses. And it isn't about this exactly, but it was about my grandfather, losing my grandfather, who came to live with us to die, basically. I was 16, he died in our home. It was very traumatic, but that story, I've tried for years and years to write about him, but it wasn't this boy with the dogs in the woods and his grandfather who told him stay out the woods. And it's funny how you'll read that and go, how is this? But the little details, just the feeling of it, the sense of loss. Grieving someone is a lot like being alone in the woods at night and you can't find your way. And I didn't realize that until the story was done, of course, but.
Right. I love that.
Yeah.
I I had a question that has to do with that a little bit. I'm kind of popping ahead because we did have a little bit of a schedule,
Okay.
but I think it'll be okay. So what Linda did, and I was going to ask both Audra and Linda, and we were all going to talk a little bit about our writing process, and I think we've already kind of gotten into that. But one of the things that I wanted to say about Linda's book, because I think this is one of the best things I've ever seen, and I've seen other authors do it, but I was so glad Linda did it. At the back of this book, she has written an author note for each one of them. And the story she was just talking about, Stay Out the Woods, she writes, I miss my grandpa. He was Italian and spoke at first before learning English when he went to kindergarten. He was the second born of twins, which earned him the name Secondino on his birth certificate, until the local priest baptized him Billy, claiming it was a nickname for Secondino. I imagine he did that as a kindness to my great-grandparents who never did speak English. It made my grandpa fit in. And she goes on to explain for each one of the stories what her prompt was, or something about the story. And I think that that's so important to all of us as writers. I've noticed this like lately as I've been trying to promote the book. I love talking about the process of how the story came to be. And the sad part about it is if we don't have these author notes included, readers don't know where they began. Not that it matters, because sometimes we don't have to know, just like you said, Linda, we don't have to know necessarily in the end. If the story stands on its own, we don't have to know what the prompt was, but it is fascinating to see how stories begin and how they become what they are. So that was a question I had for both of you. Like, what is your writing process like? Just what is your process like? What is it like?
Audra, you go.
Oh, I'm still trying to figure out my process.
Isn't that the truth, though?
One thing I have
Isn't that the
learned is
truth?
every story comes out differently, kind of like babies, your delivery for every child's different. And that's what I do know about stories, is that everyone, I try to get the same circumstances and recreate the same thing for my last story. I think, okay, that I liked how that worked. I'll try and do all that again, but it just doesn't work that way. I think you got to follow the story, and we're all writers. So it's like, some come out really fast and furious. Others you shelve for years and years and years and take them back out. For me, the biggest thing is finding writing routine. I need it. I still need a routine, and I still don't have one. I had one for a while when my daughter was a little older, and we homeschooled, and then after homeschool, she would do her art and I would write. And this is about the time when we met back in 2015, where I was really pumping out the stories. And then I got pregnant again. And so then I had a little one and a boy, and it's just since then I've been up and down, and I haven't found a routine, and so my routine is right when I can, on my phone when he's at the pool, or just late at night, have a notepad by my bed and just try to steal little moments. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I always feel like I'm chasing a lover, like I'm trying to get to my writing, and it kind of keeps it alive and sparky, but then I just feel like we never can get together. So it's slow for me. It's still slow, and I'm a slow writer to begin with, so I'm lucky to publish a couple things a year. That's a good year for me if I get like two things done.
But
So
wow, your
I don't
whole
know.
collection, though, if we get 2 things like that a year, what a treat.
Exactly.
That
And you
whole-
mentioned Audra that we met in 2015, and I wanted to say like a little bit about that, because anyone that's tuning in that might not know, we met in a Kathy Fish class, and then it was like one of her first classes, and we decided that we wanted to write together and keep writing together. So we became the Fish Tank, and there are several other members in the Fish Tank, and we haven't been together as much lately, but we've followed along with each other's writing along the years. And I think that my writing process is the same as yours, Audra, in some ways, because I didn't have the luxury of having all day to write. I never have, because I've been either a caregiver, or I was teaching, or I was editing, or I was helping my husband do his excavating work. I was his gopher for him. So I had to write when I found the time, just stick it in wherever it could. And I thought there was something wrong with that. I thought, I'm not a real writer if I can't sit down and have a definite time every day to write. I just felt like I wasn't authentic somehow. And then I took Kathy's class, and it reinforced in me that I could write quickly and powerfully if I had the right dedication and prompt, and if I had some people in my life who could read even the first ugliest draft and give me some positive feedback that
That's
that
important.
would give me the feeling
Yeah.
that I was on to something. And in Kathy's class, that's what I got. And so what I try to do beyond her classes, and I would say to Linda, I know I had this conversation with you, I can't write unless I'm in a Kathy class because she
Heard
gives me
that,
so much
yeah.
inspiration. But the reality was that I think what I learned how to do is write really quickly without having that critical lens. So I try to write like 25-minute spurts and then put it away and then come back to it with a kinder Jolene that can be more supportive of myself when I read it and say, hey, that was just my first gut draft, you know? So I've tried to incorporate that into my process, like get it down as quickly as you can without thinking about it. Just get it down and then go back to it later and be kind to yourself. So so thanks, Kathy, once again for helping me with my process, because it was the process I had before I took your class, but that just reinforced it for me. So what about you, Linda? What about your process?
I love what Audra said, that it's still ongoing, because yeah, I think everything comes out differently, and the minute you have it figured out, then that's the minute it doesn't work that way the next time. When my son was a year old, I started doing what Julia Cameron calls morning pages. The idea is 3 quick longhand pages every day, non-negotiable. And I started doing that. And I don't do it every day now. For very many years, probably 17 years, I was worried I would skip a day. So I've done it on Christmas morning. I've done it in hotel rooms. I've done it at dance conventions with dance moms, you know, doing whatever, sequins and feathers. For years and years and years, I did that. And that has sort of morphed now into writing a story a week that kind of had, now that Jolene says that, you know, the fish tank writers, when we first started, we would do a prompt a week, and we did that for a long time. And I remember thinking, there's absolutely no way I could write a flash a week. That I'm not fast enough, but I did, and everybody did, and you know, over and over and over we did it. So that morphed into, now I write a story a week, and I've been doing it for 122 stories, and they range from 2,000 words to just under 12,000. And I have been lucky enough to study with a man named Dean Wesley Smith, who knew Ray Bradbury, and Ray Bradbury is one of my heroes, who did a story a week for 9 years. So he would always say, write fast. Ray Bradbury always would say, write fast, edit cold. And you start on Monday, you mail on Saturday. So he would mail out everything. And that's what I've been doing for over 2 years now. And I think I don't see myself stopping anytime soon. Every time I think I'm going to stop, I get terrified. Like I will wake up at night and think, what if I break this streak? I can't break this streak. And so now I've kind of, just for time's sake, I don't do the morning pages as much, but I do try to write something every day, just because it's that feeling of, you really do get addicted to being in the middle of a story. You really do get addicted to, I like to say it's like building yourself a blanket fort and climbing in. When I started this challenge, it was under Dean Wesley Smith, but it was 2021. And my mom had a lot of health issues, and she ended up being in an ambulance 7 or 8 times in 1 year. And because of COVID restrictions, I was never at the hospital, could never be in the hospital or the ambulance or anything like that. I literally, there were times that I was writing stories with my earbuds in, waiting for whatever call I was going to get, just thinking, build that blanket for it and get in. And that was probably one of the most valuable things that happened to me. That same year, my brother had very unexpected open heart surgery. He's unmarried. My husband and I were his next of kin, and he got through it just great. But I got my story in on Monday night before his surgery on Tuesday morning. And that has taught me that I don't need to have everything perfect to write a story, and I don't even need a perfect story. One of the fish tank prompts that sort of changed me when we were the fish tank writers outside of Kathy's class was one that Audra posted, and she posted which I've told her this a million times, it changed me. It was a Steve Almond article, and it was about, you guys have probably all heard it, but it's about like you have a class, like a pottery class. One group has to make the perfect pot. The other group, this was like an actual experiment, I think they did too. But the other group, just as many as you can. You're graded on how many you get done. And which do you think the quality was better? Because you can just flesh out the half-formed ideas, the not great ideas, whatever. So Audra's prompt that week was write a bad story. You know, overwrite, over describe, whatever. And I remember the story I wrote, which ended up getting published. I loved it early on. I thought it was the cheesiest thing I'd ever done. And so that kind of became my mantra. My daughter also kind of would talk me up through this last 2 years or so. And she would always say, why are you trying to write a good story, write a bad story? So every week I try to write a bad story. And that's what I try to do every single week.
Mhm. I love it.
So that's my process. I just try to go fast. That doesn't mean I'm not editing and I'm not, going back over, but I do try to keep that at a minimum. I try to stay close to my voice. I try to just go fast, because that is the only way I know to outrun that editor, that internal editor that's telling you, oh, you're writing about Windows again.
Right.
And that's inspiring. I need to
It's
take
so
my own
hard.
advice.
That is so hard, though, to keep that critic away, keep the critic at bay. And I just think that I don't know why we were taught to like put that criticism on top of our writing, when writing should be really joyful, And I think that some of the ways that I remember when we would talk on the phone, Linda, we'd be walking, and I also started to get a little panicked worrying that you weren't going to finish.
I know, Audra
story
would,
for the end of the week.
or I mean, Jolene would say, Jolene would be like, have you got your story done? Have you got your story done? Just a couple weeks ago, she asked me to look over something, and I said, yeah, and then I'm going to write, are you getting your story done? Are you getting your story
Yeah,
done?
I didn't want her to look at my piece until I was sure she got her story done, because I'm so invested in her keeping the streak going. But I do think that it's important, like if you can sort of have these things in your mind that can take that critical voice away. One of them for me was, I remember I was writing one of the pieces in this book called The List, and it was from a prompt in Kathy's class where we had to write like a rant, but it wasn't enough for me to write a rant in like one whole sentence. I put another problem on the story to make my critical head kind of go in a different direction. And what it was I wanted to use as many words with double letters as I could. So words with double P, double O, double L. It actually, there's something that happens in the mind of someone that has OCD like I do. If you put some kind of strange order on something, it can push you to make sure you're not counting on that critical self. Another story in the collection that I did was I wanted to play with tense. And so each section one was future tense, one was present tense, one was past tense. And these are like little tricks that I do to kind of keep that critical mind at bay so that I can get into the story. And I just think that that's one of the most important things to do. Some people can't write from prompts, but people like me, like if I try to just sort of write when the spirit moves me or without any kind of parameters, it's really hard for me to write. So I think sometimes using things like that is a really fun thing to do. And I think the thing that you do, Linda, too, is that when you kind of put that idea of I have to do a story a week, it doesn't matter if it's good or it's bad, it pushes you because you can't listen to the critic. Exactly what you said. You can't. I mean, you don't have time to. There's no room. So I love it. I love that.
I love that. That's in that the double, what'd you say again about the list? The double what?
Yeah, they're double letters, double O, double L, double P, like a lot of the words. If you go through and there's
and the one with tense. I want to guess the steep side.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's what I thought. But I wasn't sure. I want to ask, we're all over the place now, but I want to get this question in because I'm just really using this as my own personal Zoom chat. Another thing we all do is we all have speculative elements to our stories. And Audra, I'm going to go back to that illumination story because I'm going to argue that that is actually speculative in nature. And I'm just going to read this one little thing. 3 weeks after her miscarriage, Guinevere fell in love with a light bulb. a 40-watt incandescent globe from the dining room sconce. I love that story. So while that's not maybe strictly speculative, and your father Frederick is definitely speculative, I'll ask you sort of what you asked me, Audra. Do you intentionally put magic into your stories, or is that reflective of how you see the world? How does that happen?
Um, I think it's kind of reflective of how I see the world. Um, yeah, it's like, and people are like, well, what did that, like, illumination, what's that a metaphor for? And it's, it's obvious that, she's replacing her baby with the light bulb. But, for me, she really falls in love with the light bulb. I'm not smart enough, I don't think, to concoct things, like maybe some writers do, or have them mean other things. I'm like, no, she falls in love with the light bulb for real. And all my stories, they're really doing these things that I have them doing in my mind. Other people may read them differently, but everything is like, for real, this is really happening for me.
And the
So
character that sees the ghost of the dead brother outside the house.
yeah,
Also, another
yeah, that's
speculative
real
element.
to me. They're really seeing the dead brother out there.
Even the halved man, is that what it's called? Am I remembering that correctly? Stan, who goes to the funeral, the amazing halved man. Technically, I don't think there's any magic in that one, but it just has that feel because you say the word magic. He was a magician, correct? I think was he a magician? Am I
He
remembering?
went to see a magic show and he was
Oh,
called up on
that's right.
stage. So he did do the magic, because he was
Right,
called up on stage and he thinks he can do it again. So
right.
yeah, I'm like that little kid who thinks they can do this stuff.
I
They
love
think
that.
magic's real. I like to
I
think
love
it's all
that.
real.
I love that. And I love how the three of us have written different lengths and different collections, but we all have that sort of little golden edge, that little sparkle. And Jolene, is shell reading real?
Okay, no, but it is to
That's so
me.
disappointing. That's so disappointing. So explain shell reading in case someone has not read it. What is shell reading?
Okay, so the story Shell has to do with Tiller Shanty and his wife Mai, who he met in Vietnam and brought her home as a bride. They read the eggshells of red-winged blackbirds, and no, it's not real, technically. But to me, it was a way that I could show my characters dealing with PTSD. They needed some, again, order in their life. And I was at an art show at the Silver Eye Studio. It was a photography show. And there was this photographer named Rosamond Purcell who would photograph egg nests and egg shells. And when I saw one of her photographs of the eggshells of red-winged blackbirds, which I had never seen before. There were these squiggles and it looked like actual people or letters. Anyway, it looked like something you could read and get something from it. So I made the story up. I found out afterward that in my research that people read fortunes in so many things that I didn't realize, but one of them is called, it's UFA something or other. Anyway, it's reading fortunes in a cracked egg. When you crack it and you see the oak, it will actually tell you something. And I want to meet someone who does that because I want that to tell me my fortune. But no, that is totally, I guess, speculative or whatever you would call it. But I believed it to be true. And I'm hoping someone out there can read fortunes on red-winged blackbird eggs because I would love that to happen for me.
So in some ways that was a conscious speculative choice, but you're naturally drawn to that. You're naturally sort of fascinated. And you four are the one also has definite with the grandmother, definite speculative.
Yeah. But I think for me, what I was dealing with whenever I was writing a lot of these stories was I was grieving people and I was looking for signs to see if the people that had passed on could let me know they were still in my life. And so one of the stories, a guy, falls in love with a doe. He thinks that, it's potentially his wife, but I think it was my way to try to put, again, some order into my life and figure out, well, how can we make people still connect with us when they go beyond us somewhere else? So I do believe in it. But I think writing the stories helped me make it more concrete. And so now, I'm always looking for signs. So
I love that. What else do we want to talk about? Do we have any comments or questions? Are there questions in the chat, or do we keep going? Because we can keep going.
I don't see any questions in the chat. Let's see.
It's just me saying, wow, and I love that.
But I do have a question for everyone. So I know that we're all influenced by other kinds of writing. What we read, maybe we read poetry or things like that, but in the arts or in life in general, are there other things that influence you guys with your writing? Because I know for me, anybody that reads my collection would realize it, that I'm very, very much inspired by music, like the names of musicians will show up in my stories, not lyrics, because that's kind of touchy, but I will reference music. And I also use music whenever if I'm having a really difficult time with a scene, I'll play a piece of music again and again, and it sometimes can like unlock something in my head, because that's the way I hear the world, almost sometimes with a soundtrack, because I just love music so much. So is there another art form that you all kind of gravitate toward when you're writing? Or not even an art form, maybe anything, any hobby, anything.
I think Pat is influenced by music, aren't you? Quite a bit in your writing?
I guess probably that's an understatement. It's part of everything I do. In fact, I'll digress just a little bit, and then I'm going to get out of here because I'm interested in hearing your guys talk. Kathy, your workshop last Saturday, that first 6-7 minute, that opening of yours, you were peeking into my soul on that one. Not the nature so much. It was more ambient, everything. And I may have to change my collection title to that. And it is more than sound, but it's that. Yes. And I don't see the difference, kind of what Audra said, maybe Linda too. I don't know any of these terms. I don't know what speculative means. I don't know what magic realism is. This is how I see and hear and feel things. And when I'm reading others' work, I suppose I think that too. I don't think about what it is. Gotten real far away from why, which is bad. No, it isn't. I like it. But I love hearing people talk about the whys of their work. But to me, it's that, not why. And I think Jolene and Audra know what I feel about their work and them as people. Linda, I'm an admirer of your work from a distance, and I'm getting your book. So this has been really fascinating for me to hear you guys. It helps that you know each other, I would say too. And
Well,
Kathy, you're in the middle of all of this for all of us. So, yes, all right.
No, I just get lucky.
I have to comment, Pat, on your bookshelf, which is absolutely stellar. Because
it's my son's room.
Well,
sorry.
There you go. It's stellar. I see
Yes.
Jack Nicholson in The Shining.
Yeah, my son was into that.
So that's exciting to me. But yeah, I love what you said about not asking the why. I think that's really cool. I think for me, a lot of the talking we're doing now, the why is sort of the after the fact. It's kind of fun to look back. And so I love what you said about that.
Oh, certainly during the process. Oh no, I just go.
Right.
I think you were saying that. Don't question yourself. And I know it can be a challenge. I just no.
No, I agree. I think that for me, if I just let myself go and I don't edit, meaning edit on any level, edit by the word level, by content level, by any level, I think that subconsciously the story tells you what it wants to be, and you have all the answers in it that you need. And so for me, if I just sort of set it back and look at it, and I noticed too, one of the things, since you brought it up, Pat, about music influences you, I think for me, when I'm reading your work, it brings me to a point of like, I'm so emotionally gutted sometimes by it, because you do take that, what music does, and then your rhythms of your words as well. And it's just this wonderful combination of musicality in emotion, in content, and then literally as well. So that's just fascinating to me. But I think you're right, like that whole idea of how do we get in and out of the piece? How do we stay in it? How do we not kind of make ourselves move away from it too soon and give it enough room and enough breadth and depth to be able to be what it wants to be and trust it? Because that's the whole thing. I think if we don't trust ourselves with our writing, that's not good. It's not good. So
Yeah, I was gonna say the trust thing, whether it's you or what maybe it's not you. It's just the thing you're doing. You can take yourself out of it if you're afraid of trusting yourself. But yeah,
exactly. Right.
I totally agree. And when you get in that groove, don't question it. Just go. You know.
Just go. Just go. That's right.
The words
Love
are flowing. You don't ever want to quench them.
No.
There's a Bible verse that says, quench not the spirit. I love that Bible verse. And I think of it with writing. If those words are going, you don't ever stop it. You just let it go. I mean, you can cut if you want, but it might be leading you someplace else, but you got to go when they're going. Do we have any other questions, or what do you guys think?
It's just super fun, like Pat said, to hear you three talk to each other, and that each other, each other's work. And I mean, I'm fascinated by process and just, it's just been super fun to hear you bounce ideas off each other and questions off each other. So this is cool. This is really a cool kind of way to
That's
do it.
fun. Thanks for everybody coming. I do have one more thing I want to say, but if everyone needs to go, because it's about time to go, but I want to get one more thing in. I have one to say about Jolene. And Jolene, your writing, you do a lot of colloquialisms. That's one thing I loved about this collection. The voice sounds really good. I mean, they all kind of match up. You can tell they're all from the same area, and your turns of phrases are just beautiful. And there's just one, and you're gonna probably laugh at the one I pick out because it's I don't know, but it's one that I've still been thinking about. But it's in Where Lottie Lived, and I won't say too much, but that Lottie leaves her house, and she says, "Yes, it was time to leave. The next day, Lottie was gone. Where would she go? Anywhere but here, the lobby of the hospital, maybe the church's cry room, in their abandoned cabin out near the creek bed, in the Wells pool house. There were so many places she could tuck in." And I was like, I would have just wrote, "There's so many places she could go." But you wrote, "There's so many places she could tuck in." And I was just like, I had just had to stop and have a Selah moment and think on that for a while, because I was like, and I was wondering if that came out in the writing or if that's something you go through in editing and kind of bring out the language later. Because, tuck in, it could be, there's just such a visual there of tucking in. It says a lot about the character. And I just love that, because everybody could have just put go. There's so many places she could go, but you said there's so many places she could tuck in.
Oh, thank you.
And that's just one little bit of the whole book, but I just really zeroed in on that.
Well, thank you. I think that what we have all been saying this whole time is get into that flow, get it going, take away that critical self. And when you do that, I believe, for me at least, this happens. I can definitely hear the voices more clearly. I can definitely see the places more clearly if I get rid of the critical self. So absolutely, all those years of eavesdropping on my neighbors, on my parents' conversations, on my siblings' conversations with their friends, to listen, just hear the people. I can hear them talking to me. And if I don't self-edit and make sure I'm grammatically correct, or the syntax is right, or the cadences are right, or whatever, then I'll hear those things pop out, because otherwise they won't come out. It's more difficult to bring them out in editing. And I have to be careful not to take them away. Because
Right.
I bring in that critical kind of self in the editing process, and I have to be careful with it. But I do something that I think helps a little. At a point where I'm editing, I have my computer read it in the computer voice, because it's really interesting how the computer voice will highlight when something is absolutely like you're talking about. It's off. It doesn't work, quote, right? It doesn't work. But the computer voice will allow me to see it. And then I get to decide, oh, you know what? I got to keep tuck in. I got to keep it. It shows me that it's quote unquote not right, but I definitely want to keep it. So I love using the colloquialisms, and lovely that I had an editor at Melville House that liked them and wanted even more of it. So I was really happy about that. But thank you so much for bringing that up.
I want to mention one thing about your stories too, Jolene. Don't be jealous, but I have read a Jolene novel. I haven't just read the short stories. And one thing that she does, which I don't think I realized till I read an entire novel of hers. Hopefully that's okay that I can say that I've read it.
Yes, yeah.
It's fast. It's fabulous. It's absolutely fabulous. It's going to get published and you all are going to read it. It's great. But one thing I think she does in that novel, but she also does in her short stories, I feel like the book has a voice. The story has its own voice. The story, I don't know how to say it other than that. Like there's just this voice that you have, so that like the book is telling the story, that and the place is almost a character. The pages are almost a character. And I know that sounds probably kind of out there and kind of crazy, but I just feel like your stories have such a voice that you can almost hear it. You can almost hear it as a separate entity. And I just think that's great. So whatever you're doing, keep doing.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being my beta reader, by the way. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Well, we are 8:02 Central Time on a Friday night, so I don't want to keep anybody but Kathy, Jan, Patricia, Pat. Thank you so much for coming and joining the
Thank you so
conversation with
much.
the
And
rural
thanks,
writers.
Mom.
Yeah.
Thank you to
And
my
Mom
mom
and
for
Libby.
coming.
I don't have her picture there, so sorry, Miss Libby. I'm sorry. I see your name, but yes, I'm so thankful you're here. So I guess we'll sign off. Thank you all for coming.
Okay.
Oh,
Thank
thanks for
you
doing this
so
with
much,
me.
Thanks so
Audra
much,
and
Kate.
Linda.
It's so good to see
It's
you
really
guys.
fun.
Good to see
Awesome.
everyone.
Awesome, thanks.